Year of the Rat by Alec Peterson. Sir? The old man managed one eye open and groaned inwardly. The nurse before him was not who he was hoping for. Still, that wasn't her fault. No need to be rude. Yes, he coughed once. Yes, what do you need? Well, sir, I'm sorry to bother you, but my son is such a big fan of your films, and I was wondering... The old man coughed again, long and low, with a rasp, like burning leaves. He hated the affliction that had him hacking his life away one bloody handkerchief at a time. But he had no one to blame but himself. If he could fill his last days with good, maybe. Of course, it's no problem. I can sign something for you. The nurse's smile lit the room and almost made him smile back. It reminded him of his youth, the reason he started his legacy in the first place. There was nothing that made a person look better than a real smile. Oh, thank you so much, sir! She gushed as she handed him a picture of her son, he assumed. Bright-eyed, smiling and hopeful. The old man scrawled his name on the back of the boy's picture, the future. He felt a pang in his chest as he realized he would not meet this boy. He would never see anything, affect anything in his life. Maybe after he was dead, the boy could sell the picture, buy some gum and soda with it. Lord, being trapped in his own body was making him cynical. Oh, thank you, the nurse gushed. The old man settled back into his pillows and let the morphine work its magic, one miraculous drop at a time. His eyes wandered to his bedside table, seeking something, anything, to take his mind off his current situation. He smiled faintly at the white mice gambolling in their cage. Most people at St. Joseph's weren't allowed to have pets, but being famous did have its advantages. He had always liked mice, the clever, winsome things. Rats, though, were a different story entirely. He shuddered hard, his body bending under the storm of coughing. Rat. Such an innocent word to bring so much agony. Are you okay, Grandpa? The old man looked at the door. The honest answer was no, but he was saved from answering by the teary-eyed but straight-faced young woman standing next to the boy. Hello, Chris. Hi, Diane. Grandpa gave them a weak smile. Diane came to the side of the bed and kissed her father on the forehead. Mom and Sharon are downstairs. They wanted a word with the doctor. Christopher just couldn't wait to see you. Grandpa held his arms out to Christopher, who smiled a gap-toothed grin at him before giving him a hug that would have been far too hard if not for the morphine. A shadow passed across the wall, angular and sinister. The old man's arms instinctively tightened on his grandson as if to protect him. Diane saw the flicker of panic on his face, misinterpreted it as pain. Careful, Chris. No, He's all right, Grandpa said, through another fit of coughing. Di, why don't you go get us an ice cream? Would you like an ice cream, Chris? The answer, of course, was an affirmative. Diane left with an order for 2 chocolate cones. Christopher chattered about his school, his friends. The words barely pierced the haze of opiates until the old man heard it again. Did you say rat, Chris? The old man almost choked on the hated word. His grandson nodded the affirmative. Yes, sir. At the pet shop. He's white with a long tail. Mom promised I could get a pet, so... Christopher was a smart young lad. He noticed that his grandpa was looking less than pleased. You don't like rats, Grandpa? He could just let it go. Just make some non-committal comment, deflect suspicion. Let his grandson have his damn pet without tainting it. But here, with the shadows closing in and the end coming fast, the old man felt like he would go mad if he didn't tell someone. Chris, did I ever tell you about when I went to Chinatown? I was a young man then. I'm very sorry, sir, but your loan application has been denied. Walt frowned as he tried to untangle the man's garbled speech. The man clearly had some kind of larynx infection or a cleft palate that made it impossible to understand a word he said. But Walt had been rejected enough times recently to know when it happened again. We simply don't feel confident in the proposal. We have a responsibility. I'm sorry, Walt said through gritted teeth, but I can't understand a word you're saying. Being turned down for the umpteenth time in a row was bad enough, but the man was completely unintelligible, and it was an exercise in frustration trying to make any sense of what he had to say. I'm saying no, Mr. Disney. We cannot fund your playground. Amusement park, Walt snapped. Playgrounds are for small children. My amusement park will be for kids of all ages and their families. The man's expression slid into that combination of apathy and ignorance that made Walt's teeth ache and his fists tighten. This bureaucratic drone, this rube, had all the imagination of a low-watt bug zapper, and yet he had the gall to deny him his dream. Deny the children the wonder he would bring them. This mush-mouthed, pea-brained, I'm sorry, sir. Betty, send in the next customer, please. The banker's voice cut through Walter's anger and forced him to focus once more on the here and now. Out of luck, out of hope, and just plain screwed. He stood up with his eyes screwed shut, trying to tune out the man's infuriating voice. He turned and stormed away from the man's desk, but stopped short when he was confronted with the banker's face on the wall. Donald Drake, Employee of the Month. Walt snorted angrily. Yeah, right. After adjusting his hat, Walt looked out into the city and the people that filled it. They looked bored, uninspired, like something vital was missing from their lives. Wonder, he concluded. They have lost their sense of wonder. And thanks to Donald, the unintelligible loan officer, they would remain without wonder and without hope. Just like me. Shoulders slumped, Walt pushed his way out of the bank branch office and onto the streets of San Francisco.
Mister, can you spare a dime? Walt turned as he heard a small voice. The child couldn't have been older than 6 or 7 and was cradling the fattest cat he had ever seen, a huge black and white beast with a feral eye, and possessed of a thoroughly disagreeable countenance. What? Oh, yeah, sure. Walt sighed and fished around in his pocket and removed a grimy coin. Running short on these, he thought grimly to himself. Still, the children had to come first. Here you go, son. He stretched out his hand towards the boy, when suddenly the fat cat hissed and swiped at him. The claws connected and drew blood. Ow! Walt shrieked and yanked his hand back, dropping the coin onto the floor. Hey, what's the big idea? Sorry, mister, the boy offered. Pete doesn't like you. Looks like Pete doesn't like anybody, the older man grumbled and scanned the dirty ground looking for the coin as he sucked on the bleeding wound. I believe you are looking for this. Man and boy turned and witnessed Sinia's shadow detach itself from the darkness around the walls and struck towards them. It was a woman. But such a woman neither had ever seen. Hair was as dark as the midnight sky over the ocean, with skin as pale as the moon and eyes the colour of amber. She was clearly of Asian descent, but her features were unconventionally voluptuous, in a manner not often seen amongst her people. Walt's mouth ran dry at the sight of her. "You gape as if you haven't seen a woman before," the woman teased in a thick accent. "No, I've just..." Walt struggled to regain his footing. He was a salesman. He was supposed to dominate in any conversation that he was part of. Take control like a proper man should. Besides, he was married, for God's sake. "Forgive me." Walt's tone became urban and calm as he slid into his confident persona as a hand to a glove. "I've simply never seen a woman like you. You're quite striking. For a celestial." "No, Again, the exotic woman caught him up short, and she now approached him with all the confidence that he wished he possessed. Upon closer inspection, her features weren't quite flawless. Her chin was a little pronounced, her nose a bit too sharp for those soft eyes that upon closer inspection possessed a yellowish hue and a feral quality. "It's quite all right," the woman assured him. "My appearance has been the object of curiosity and fascination for a very long time." Walt smirked with a smugness he didn't feel. Fascination might be a bit much. Would it? She quirked her lips and smiled, no, leered at him. The expression looked hungry and most unsettling, but he could not force himself to look away from that luscious mouth with lips the colour of the very best of wines and the very worst of intentions. "You continue to gape, kind sir." Walt shook himself hard and then frowned. "Hey, where'd the kid go?" The woman shrugged. "He no doubt bolted back down his hole. Mortimer can be quite the dormouse at times, I'm afraid." The woman was making Walt uncomfortable. She moved like a woman. What a woman! But she spoke with a man's confidence, using words and tones that were supposed to be soul purview of the stronger sex. This woman was thoroughly alien to him. An angry rumbling from his stomach interrupted his reverie and replaced his rising indignity with mortification. "Why, good sir, you sound positively famished." She laughed, a rich, sweet sound, and when her mouth opened, Walt was startled to see her teeth were rather distinctly pointed and discoloured as well, a faint yellow that seemed to be an identical shade as her eyes. On anyone else, they would convey an impression of pestilence, but on her they simply added to riddle of her allure. "Oh, heck, Miss Migny," she replied easily. "At your service, good sir." And this unsettlingly confident woman shocked him with a curtsy. "You can call me Walt," he replied. "And yeah, I had to skip breakfast to make a meeting. Man business, you know how it is." "And how did your man business proceed?" Her tone teasing, she was laughing at him. "Well, it's very technical. I wouldn't want to bore you with the details. You were rejected, weren't you?" Walt's humiliation was compounded tenfold by her mocking expression, perfectly contrite in its demureness, yet serving as only the thinnest of veneers, concealing the deepest and most hidden of depths, and swirling somewhere within those forbidden waters lurked something completely unknown to him. You were turned away by limited men of limited minds, living limited lives, blind to the elegance of your imagination. She kept her gaze downcast as she approached him, appearing almost submissive, and then her yellow eyes locked onto his, and all vestiges of submission vanished. Unworthy of the beautiful that your most worthy of imaginations would bestow upon the world. Yes, Walt croaked. Yes, exactly. He couldn't look away. He was enthralled, and even as he felt everything he had been raised to believe without propriety, the rightness of society, and the correctness of its ways and ethics, his sense of individuality, fueled by the same imagination that had brought him to this desolate time and place in his life, burnt through the costume society had forced him to wear since his birth like a bonfire through tissue paper. You have such gifts to bestow upon a world that spurn them, and when they should be receiving your very existence as the blessing it truly is. Yes, I can't make them understand. Minyi slipped her pale, slender arm through his own, and in that moment he was a successful man about town, escorting this rarest of treasures through a world filled with only possibilities. I will understand, she whispered to him, if you would be willing to explain your man business to me over dinner. Of course, Walt stammered. He was grinning like an idiot, and for once he didn't care if he looked stupid. He was with her and she with him. Everything would be all right. Right this way, good sir. Walt, please. Minyi smiled coyly. As you like, Walt. Walt couldn't get over how good he felt in Minyi's presence. She had taken him straight through the heart of Chinatown, and now, cutting through side street and alley, the man found that he felt confident, ready and able to take on the world on his terms and no one else's. A free man. His own man. Tell me, Walt, Minyi cooed. What spurred you to give one of your last dimes to a child? Walt's confidence faltered for a moment as raw emotion replaced it. The children are our future. They deserve nothing less than everything in our power it is to give. It has been said that children owe their parents an obligation, especially in their later years. She stepped over a pair of what appeared to be squabbling chipmunks, continuing. Society teaches us that children owe their parents everything, for it was they who bestowed upon them the gift of life. It's called a gift of life and not a debt, because it's not some marker to be called in by the child's parents when things get tough. He countered, with a bit more fire than he intended. Parents may give their children life, but children give their parents' lives meaning. He noted the squabbling chipmunks, a pair of truly ridiculous-looking creatures, with mild curiosity, before returning to his conversation. Children don't owe their parents. Parents owe their children. The exotic-looking woman lifted an eyebrow in polite interest. Is that how it is? She asked mildly. That's how it is, Walt confirmed. Indeed. In the years that followed his encounter with Minyi, Walt would always remember that smile and wonder why it failed to fill him with the sense of dread and foreboding that it should have in hindsight. But for this moment, as Minyi opened the door for Walt into a small cafe tucked away in the corner of the cul-de-sac, he couldn't think of anything else other than how absolutely ready he was to eat. barking of the wildly overexcited dog caught Walt's attention upon the threshold of the small bistro. And as a mangy-looking dog came trundling up the street to greet them, he tried not to flinch. This was not his lucky day when it came to animals, a notion confirmed by the stinging sensation in his hand from Pete the cat's wicked claws. "Good boy, Mars," the woman cooed and scratched the unkempt animal behind its ears. It obligingly slobbered in joy at his mistress's touch. "Mars?" Walt scoffed. "You named your dog Mars?" "I did. Do you not like it?" She pouted prettily, but Walt refused to be suckered any further by the beautiful woman's feminine wiles. "Kind of a goofy name for a dog, ain't it?" The woman smiled thinly. "Why, Mr. Disney, do tell. Which god would you name your dog after?" Walter's hackles rose. Religion had been a matter of no small devotion, both in his upbringing and now in his adult life. There's only one God, and the Lord Jesus Christ is his Son, and the Saviour of the world. Such a limited view for such an imaginative man. She appeared amused, but Walt hadn't become a semi-successful businessman without learning how to read people, even as inscrutable as his escort. He could tell she was in fact irritated with his reply. He could almost hear gritting those small, sharp yellow teeth in her otherwise flawless mouth. "You forget that my people had our own gods and spirits for thousands of years before your own." A wrong answer is a wrong answer, no matter how old it may be. Min Yi shook her head. "You should be careful with such words, Walt. You would not want the most imaginative man of his generation to leave behind a legacy of bigotry and intolerance instead, would you?" She didn't wait for an answer, instead gliding away as effortlessly as a leaf on the wind, leaving Walt to mumble in her wake. Still a goofy name for a dog. Walt frowned as he entered the empty room. There's nobody here. "I'm very selective about the company I keep for dinner," was the woman's only response. She moved to an extremely ornate table made of lacquered wood and painted red with gold inlay and adorned with thick candles. "Nice piece," Walt noted. "Antique?" Min Yi purred. "Extremely. It's been in my family for many generations." "You've still got family back in?" Walt frowned. "Well, I'm assuming you're from China?" "Originally, but my family and I immigrated here at the turn of the 1800s. "You and your family?" Walt grinned easily. He was starting to get used to this strange woman's sense of humour. He felt sure in his ability to keep the upper hand. Like anything else, it was all about confidence. "Well, you look very well preserved for 100 years and change." "Thank you." Chuckling to himself, Walt frowned at the designs engraved on the table. "I don't think I recognise these designs." "I imagine you would not," Min Yi confirmed. "These are the representations of the Chinese zodiac." "Huh," Walt shrugged. "Takes all kinds," he thought to himself with the smug superiority that comes to all men who believe themselves in possession of a firm command of their world. He loved how she could make him feel like this. "What, so you read the future in the stars or something like that?" He smiled, self-consciously. It all sounded so ridiculous. Something like that, she confirmed coyly. She gently rapped her knuckles on the table. The sound resounded through the otherwise empty room. Suddenly, they were no longer alone as a pair of Asian waiters entered, each bearing a silver pot. Walt thought he detected the scent of frying oil, and he sniffed twice. "Are we having fried food?" "You have a very keen nose," Min-Yi confirmed. "I like that in a man." Walt blushed at her tone, even as his pulse quickened at all the conjecture. The primal part of his brain spawned regarding what else she liked in a man. "What year were you born, Walt?" she asked, playfully. 1901, he replied as he took himself out of his reverie. "Oh," she frowned prettily. "The year of the ox." "What's that now?" "Each year in the zodiac corresponds with an animal. Yours is an ox." "An ox, huh?" he laughed. "Well, you wouldn't be the first woman to call me that." "Really?" Min-Yi purred, as the waiters lit a small flame under one of the 2 silver pots and put down a variety of odd-looking implements that Walt could only guess were exotic Chinese dining utensils. "Is there anything particularly ox-like about you, Walt?" The man's mouth ran dry at her tone, and his brain immediately locked up. He frantically attempted to get a handle on the situation and remain in control. Tell me, have you considered putting aside all this hocus-pocus and accepting Jesus Christ as your Lord and Saviour? Actually, I was considering that if you were just 1 year older, you would have been born in the year of the rat, which is when my family came to these shores. It is my favourite sign of the zodiac. Walt smirked. They were back on this old joke. Women could be such silly little things once they got a notion in their head. "Well, I guess I'm stuck being a cow." "Ox," she gently corrected. "And you don't strike me as an ox." "I don't?" "Not at all," she smiled. "Those born and beholden to the year of the rat are characterised by their wit, their creativity and ambition." She looked away demurely. "Their charm." "No kidding," Walt grinned. "You think I'm charming?" "Why don't we discuss it over dinner?" "Of course." Walt remembered his manners and helped Min-Yi into her chair. Such good manners. Min-Yi smiled at him with her wine-coloured lips and her small, sharp-looking teeth. "Clearly, you're a man of excellent taste." "I do try," he assured her, lending himself to a swagger as he took his own seat opposite her. Frowning, he picked up a pair of tongs. "What are we having? Fondue?" "Very similar to fondue." "Hoekyo." "Hoekyo?" He tried to wrap his mouth around the strange words. "What is that? Chinese?" "Yes," she informed him casually. "It means hot pot." She removed the lid from the first silver pot, revealing a steaming cauldron of bubbling oil. 1,000 different spiced scents emanated from its rolling depths. Walt leaned over carefully, to avoid splatter and inhaled deeply. Oh, it smells heavenly. Indeed it does. Her eyes reflected liquid gold in the dim light of the room. Are you ready for the main course? Absolutely. Still smiling, Min Yi removed the heavy silver lid from the second pot and revealed a squirming swarm of newborn baby mice. Bon appetit. She leaned forward across the table. That's French. It means good appetite. God almighty! Walt screamed, leaping out of his chair and knocking it backwards to the floor. Sit down! And suddenly, Min Yi wasn't Min Yi any longer. Her roar washed over Walt like a storm. It nearly battered him to his knees. Through the fires of the candlelight, Walt saw her form wavered and shifted in the shadows. She wasn't a woman at all, but some horrible creature like a giant rat. What's the matter? Don't you want to screw me anymore? The rat thing that was once a woman hissed at him. What are you? I am old, Walt. My kin and I dwelt among you for thousands of years in our home, within amongst the three kingdoms, the dynasties in the Celestial Empire. We came across the ocean in tramp freights, held within the hearts and minds. Walt was trying and failing to get a grip on reality. That most spacious of homes, their imaginations, Walt, fueled by their mighty hearts, just like yours. Nothing in Walt's religion, his upbringing, nothing in his life could prepare him for what he was seeing. He fished around in his shirt and produced his cross. Back! Get thee behind me, Satan! The rat thing looked irritated. My kin and I existed long before that pale carpenter, and we shall exist long after his memory is lost to the ages. You're a liar! Walt screamed. You're the devil! I am neither. The rat beast hissed. And before you run out that door, ask yourself, where was God when that gruesome son of a in the bank turned you down for your loan? And the one before him, and the one before that. How did you? I know you, Walt. The rat creature's tone became soft and consoling. The frustrated dreamer, betrayed by a world that neither wants nor understands them. All you have ever wanted, ever done, is to bring back hope, happiness, wonder. Walt jolted as the demon's words found his heart and squeezed. What do you want from me? The demon crossed around the table, and suddenly she was Min Yi again. Beautiful, mysterious, able to inspire wonder and fascination in his bones and blood. In a manner that nothing, not even God, had ever stirred in him. I want you to remain true to yourself. I want you to show the same courage you've shown all your life in sustaining your dream, in keeping it alive, and apply it to turning it into a reality. For a long time, Walt looked between the woman, the dinner table with its squirming contents, and the door. "And if I want to leave?" he asked quietly. "And go where? Back home to whatever nothing life you left behind? The church that didn't provide the answers you needed? The family that couldn't understand you? Your so-called friends that mocked and laughed at you? The bureaucrats and the dull-minded that have held you down and frustrated all your life? When all you've tried to do is make the world a better place?" The slight woman shrugged. "You can go back to that if you really want to. I certainly won't stop you. But rest assured, Walt, despair will kill you far more cruelly than I." Gently, the rat that wore a woman's disguise took his hands away from his cross. "Ask yourself, Walt, between me and the rest of your world, who's done more to hurt you?" Walt struggled for a moment, the last vestiges of the man he had been before he entered this private hell slipping through his fingers like sand. He released his cross and took her hand in his. "Are you going to take my soul?" She nodded. "Yes, I am." Walt shuddered as his damnation loomed before him. He didn't believe it, not for a second, he told himself. God would protect him as he always had. But if this woman could get him what he needed, and what do I get? "Everything," she whispered. "Open doors that I will walk you through, smiling faces to greet you, all the love and support you could ever ask or need to make our vision a reality." "Our vision?" Minnie's face looked sad. For a moment, she seemed almost vulnerable, human. "My family wastes their time attempting to resurrect the old glories of the Middle Kingdom. But in this America, this land of opportunity, I believe that it could be the newest and greatest kingdom." She gestured towards the man. "And you could bring about the first kingdom of the new world. A kingdom of dreams. A magic kingdom," Walt said softly. "Yes." Walt licked his lips, looked down at his shaking hands. "What happens to me after you die?" she asked gently. Walt couldn't finish the sentence and simply nodded. "I honestly don't know," she replied gently. "Nobody does. Not even my kin knows what happens on the other side." Walt drew in a long, quivering breath and then nodded. "What do I need to do?" "There must be an offering made. It is the old way, of flesh and faith." She gestured at the cross that hung bleedingly around his neck. "You have made your sacrifice. Now I must make mine." The rat woman took Walt by the hand and led him back to the table, lifting up the heavy chair with one hand and settling it back to its place at the table. She guided him back to the chair and the squirming pink mass in the silver pot. "What are they?" The man frowned, trying not to be violently ill at the sight. You said the children are the future. She gestured at creatures still mewing and clawing at the air blindly. These are mine. They're my pups, only a few moments old. She smiled sadly, and Walt again felt a moment of pity for this creature before him. They haven't even opened their eyes, still blind to the horrors of this world. What? Take, eat. This is my body, which is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me. This cup is the New Testament in my blood. This do ye as oft as you drink it in remembrance of me. Walt stared uncomprehendingly at the rat demon, and then realization hit him. He felt faint. Only her grip on his shoulder kept him from passing out completely. The tongs, the boiling oil. You want me to? With a tremendous sadness, Minyi stroked a tiny rat baby with a long claw-like fingernail across their cheek, tenderly, and Walt once again saw her form shift. Between that of the monstrous form of the bloated rat thing and the diminutive, exotic creature that had brought him so much hope in the last few hours. With her free hand, she offered Walt one of the pairs of the tongs as the baby rat nuzzled his mother's claw. Walt, think of the children. Well, that was certainly a unique take to Walt Disney's story and the introduction of all the characters we know now. I hope you enjoyed it. Sadly, because of how long that short story was, there won't be another one in today's show. However, you can look forward to our short story special coming out very soon, so keep your eyes for that. It will be jam-packed with new stories for you to listen to.